Okay, students, so this is Biosafety and Bioethics. The course code is BCHM-315. This is lecture 4, and the topic is good laboratory practices, which is also abbreviated as GLP. And I am Dr. Sadiq Ibrahim, Assistant Professor, Department of Chemistry, Cohort University of Science and Technology. And you can access these lectures through the First Media Server portal, which is ms.cohort.edu.pk. And to mark your attendance, you need to go to the KCMS account and look for the link of this lecture. So you will be automatically marked present in the online class for this lecture. Now, the topics which we are going to be discussing in this lecture, they include the general safety rules when working inside the lab, glassware safety, that how to handle the glassware in a safe manner, chemical safety. So most of the laboratories, they have a lot of chemicals, and some of the chemicals, they are hazardous in nature. So in that case, they should be handled in a safe manner. Heating safety. So most of the laboratories, they involve heating the samples or heating the test tubes or heating the glassware. So we'll be discussing in detail that how safely we can heat the things, the glassware, in a proper way. And the first aid. So sometimes in the labs, the accidents are happening, and in case of an accident, what the other lab workers and lab mates should do. So we will be discussing that as well. Now moving towards the first topic, that is the general safety rules. So listen to or read instructions carefully before attempting to do anything. So this is a very important thing, is to read out the instructions, the manuals, the procedures of the experiment properly and with focus, and then start the experiment. So that is very important, that sometimes the students, they hear from other students and that this is the way to do the experiment, and they start doing it, and ultimately it leads to a disaster. So the instructions, the procedures, the manuals, they need to be read properly and carefully, and then the experiment should be performed. Now, the second important thing is to wear safety goggles to protect your eyes from chemicals, heated materials, or things that might be able to shatter. So whenever you are doing experiment within the laboratory, and you might know that this experiment involves certain heating, it involves certain corrosive acids or materials. So in that case, you should definitely be wearing a goggle so that to uh, protect your eyes. Now, number 3 is notify your teacher if any spills or accidents occur. So if any accident occurs, or if bottle drops, or a solvent bottle drops, so then you need to inform your teacher rather than cleaning it by yourself and ultimately harming yourself. Now, within the general safety rules going along, so one thing is that when you are performing the experiment, so you are dealing with chemicals, so always wash your hands with soap and water. So there should be a provision of sink within the lab and the availability of soap within the lab. So the important thing is that after completing your experiment, you should be washing your hands properly with soap. And during lab work, keep your hands away from your face, as you are dealing with chemicals, you are dealing with solvents, and your hands are touching many places within the lab. So you should not touch your hand with your face. And there is a possibility that if you have a remnant of a corrosive material on your hand, and it might stick to your face and may cause allergy or some burning. So that's why never ever touch your face with your hands when working in the lab. Tie back long hair. So here the image shows that when you are working in the lab, uh, especially the female students, they should tie back their hair so that their hair are not contaminated with other solvents or chemicals in the laboratory. Now, some other general safety rules include that when you are working in the lab, roll up loose sleeves. So as here in the image shows that the sleeve has been rolled up because there is a chance that, for example, you are working with some acid, some solvent, and the sleeves they might get touched with the solvent, and as a result they can harm your wrist or your skin. Uh, know the location of the fire extinguisher, which is always available in the lab. The fire blanket, that where the fire blanket is in case of any fire, you need a fire blanket to diminish the fire, to wash out the fire. Eye wash station, so that should be available within the lab. And most importantly, the first aid kit. So if there is a cut or bruise on the hand or anywhere in the body, so then you should be able to use the first aid kit, and you should know that where the first aid kit is in the lab. So these are very important things, like the fire extinguisher, the fire blanket, the eye wash station, the first aid kit, and they are always available in the lab. Keep your work area uncluttered, which means that keep your work area neat and clean, and take to the lab station only what is necessary. So if you need one beaker, so take one beaker to your lab station, and don't take two beakers to your lab station, because ultimately your work area will become cluttered and you will not be able to perform your experiment with ease. Now, some other general safety rules in terms of the good laboratory practices include that it is suggested that you wear glasses rather than contact lenses within the lab. So that is a very important thing to note, that when you are working in the lab and you are wearing contact lenses, so there is a chance that the vapors from the solvents with which you are doing the experiment, they may damage the lenses, and it can ultimately lead to the damage of the eyes. Never put anything into your mouth during a lab experiment. So it means that you are not allowed to eat inside the laboratory. Clean up your lab area at the conclusion of the laboratory period. So when you have completed your experiment in the laboratory, so it is a good laboratory practice that you clean all your workstation, you clean all your glassware and put it in the specified area. And never horse around or play practical jokes in the laboratory. So sometimes um, the lab mates they are joking with each other, or sometimes they are like slightly running within the lab. So never ever do this. Now moving towards the glassware safety. So the chipped or cracked glassware should not be used and show it to the teacher. So sometimes when you are working with the glassware, some of the glassware they get cracked or chipped. So you should never use those glassware, because it can cause damage to your fingers or your face, and it can cut your fingers. So that's why you should not use, and show it to the teacher and he will replace it with a new one. Broken glassware should not be disposed of in a classroom trash can. There is a special glass disposal container for it. So sometimes the students or the lab workers they are throwing the broken glassware in the trash can, which is not a good practice and it should never happen. But there's always a specific container present within the lab, which is for broken glass, and it is labeled as broken glass, so you can put that broken glassware in that container. When pouring liquids into the glassware, make sure that the container you are pouring into is resting on a table at least a hand breadth from the edge. So sometimes students are adding solvents from a big bottle to a beaker, and the beaker is placed at the very edge of the table, and there is a chance that the beaker might go down on the ground or on the floor with a slight uh, edge. So that's why the beaker should be in the center of the table, and then whatever you are pouring in to the beaker you should pour in. So in terms of the glassware safety, um, if a piece of glassware gets broken, and it happens in the lab because when you are working with glassware, sometimes the glassware they get broken. So do not try to clean it up by yourself. Notify the teacher. So that is the best thing, that you notify the teacher, and the teacher will handle this properly. Do not place hard glassware in water. Rapid cooling may make it shatter. So whenever you are doing an experiment in which heating is involved, and you are heating certain sample uh, in a glassware, and then you have to cool it down, but don't directly put the glassware in the cold water, because there is a chance that it will break. Now moving towards the chemical safety, that is related to handling the chemicals in a safe manner. So wear protective goggles whenever heating or pouring hazardous chemicals. So whenever you are adding few grams of uh, hazardous chemical into a beaker or into a flask, or you are heating certain chemicals, a few gram of certain chemicals, so you should always be wearing the goggles to protect your eyes. Never mix chemicals together unless you are told to do so, and then only in a manner specified. So you may know that never put acid in water. So you should not be mixing any two chemicals randomly, but you should read the procedure carefully and then perform the experiment. Otherwise, there might be a splash and you might get damaged. Never taste any chemicals. You should never taste anything in the lab. So that is a very important thing, that never ever taste any chemical. This might lead to some infection, and also never eat anything in the lab as well. Now, from the chemical safety point of view, sometimes if you need to smell the odor of a chemical just to check or confirm that that specific chemical is present in that specific bottle, so waft the fumes towards your nose with one hand, and do not put your nose over the container and inhale the fumes. So that is very, very dangerous. So never ever do this in the laboratory with the chemicals. So whenever you are dealing with chemicals, so follow the instructions, the procedure which are given to you by your teacher when disposing of all the chemicals. And also wash your hands with soap after handling the hazardous chemicals every time you are dealing with them. Now, the good laboratory practices, they also include the heating safety. So when you are dealing with the heating certain samples or chemicals, so use tongs and or protective gloves to handle hot objects. Never use bare hands for dealing with the hot objects. And never reach across an open flame or burner. So when you are working in front of a flame or burner, and never raise your hand across the flame or burner, because it will hurt you. So moving on with the heating safety in terms of the good laboratory practices, when you are dealing with the test tubes, so always point the top ends of the test tubes that are being heated away from people. Sometimes sorry, the people are not very watchful, and they are heating the sample in the test tube, and their direction is towards their other lab mate, and sometimes a splash comes out of the test tube and goes into the eye of another lab mate, and it can really hurt. So don't do that. And when heating a test tube, move it around slowly, like for example, this is the flame and this is a test tube. So you are moving it around the flame so that distribute the heat evenly. Now, heating safety, one of the precautions which need to be taken as a good laboratory practice is only glassware that is thoroughly dry should be heated. So when the glassware has been washed and has been dried in the oven, then you should use it for heating purposes. And also heat glassware by placing it on a wide gauze which is platform on a ring stand, and never ever hold it in your hand. So this is the ring stand, and here you can have a wide gauze, and then you can have a burner here, and then you can put your glassware on top of the wide gauze on the ring stand, and never ever hold the glassware in your hand. Now moving towards first aid. So in first aid, first of all, the question is what is the injury? For example, it is the burns. The burning has taken place. So what to do? So immediately flush with cold water until burning cessation is lessened. So you can use the tap water for this purpose, and as a result of this, the burning sensation will decrease a lot. Now moving on with the first aid, the injury can be cuts or bruises within the lab. There is a possibility as you are dealing with handling glassware. So what to do? Do not touch an open wound without safety gloves. So you should be wearing safety gloves and then you can touch the wound, and pressing directly on minor cuts will stop bleeding. So if it is a minor cut, then it will stop bleeding in a few minutes, and apply the cold compress to bruises to reduce swelling. So these are the first aid steps which you can take, and there is also availability of first aid kit within the lab which you can use. Now in terms of first aid, sometimes the injury occurs to the eyes. So what to do? Flush eyes immediately with plenty of water for several minutes. So there is always the sink and the water available in the lab, and you should be flushing your eyes with plenty of water for several minutes. And if a foreign object is suspended or lodged in the eye, do not allow the eye to be rubbed. So don't rub your eye if you have something solid being caught on within your eyes. So these are the references for further reading and clear your concept about good laboratory practices. And one of the book here, which is a good one, is the Laboratory Biosafety Manual by WHO, which is also available online. And as well as at serial number 3, you have a handbook of laboratory safety, in which the good laboratory practices have been mentioned in detail. So you can read them and understand further that what you need to do and what you don't need to do inside the laboratory. Thank you.